The Great Depression hit Texas hard, but at the same time, the Depression in Texas was a little bit different than the rest of the country. Why? Because there were a lot of farms. There were a lot of farms that were able to grow their own food to keep them going. So even though the Depression hit Texas hard, it may not have been as hard or as bad as it could have been if not for the fact that so many people were still living on their farms and able to grow their own crops. Now, that said, there was still an impact, a huge impact. As for example, most farmers could at least feed their own families. We knew that. But Texans' needs for assistance grew as the Depression continued. Churches and private organizations tried to help as many people as possible, setting up soup kitchens and bread lines to give out food. Charitable organizations also donated clothing and provided shelters. Basic necessities were scarce, as one Texan recalled. The Red Cross helped some 3,000 people in Dickens County, a county of fewer than 9,000 residents. So, in a county of less than 10,000 or 9,000 residents, the Red Cross helped 3,000 people, one out of three. However, charitable organizations could not assist everyone who needed aid. As the Depression deepened, many Texans and other Americans grew frightened and angry. Local governments also struggled to deal with the Great Depression. To reduce spending, many cities and counties cut jobs. African Americans and Mexican Americans were often let go first or put at the back of the line for public assistance programs. One Texan complained, "This thing of cutting salaries and laying off employees is one of the main things that has brought on this Great Depression." Local governments also issued scrip or SCRIP or paper notes to save money. These paper notes were a promise to pay at a later date. For example, teachers in San Antonio received scrip for their salary. Such measures did little to help the Texas economy or to boost confidence. President Herbert Hoover and Governor Ross Sterling, like many Texans, opposed government programs such as unemployment relief because they claimed that it would destroy individuals with self reliance. They supported limited government aid to businesses. They believed that once businesses had recovered, new jobs would be created and the economy would revive. However, Texas and American citizens grew increasingly unhappy with these policies as the Depression continued. Now, so as you can see, the Depression affected Texas in a very special way. Churches that were very big in Texas helped out as much as they could. Now, I know you've heard of soup kitchens in the cities, but this is a these are church based organizations that tried to help the poor, and they did as much as they could. Now, that was one aspect of the Great Depression. Another one also had to do with the farmers, and that was the Dust Bowl. Now, I want you to pay close attention as I talk to you about what happened in the Dust Bowl. Although Texas farmers could grow much of their own food, the Depression hit them hard economically. Farmers had experienced difficult times during the 1920s, but life grew even harder during the 1930s. Crop prices continued to drop. In 1932, cotton sold for less than 6 cents a pound. Prices fell so low that some farmers burned their crops. As one newspaper noted, there is no waste in burning something that is hardly worth hauling to town. And so, an environmental disaster made matters worse. This is the tricky part. Ranching and farming were changing the environment. Ranching and farming were changing the environment. Cattle grazing had already damaged the native grasses. Cattle that was grazing or they're feeding themselves on the grasses. That was consuming the grasslands of Texas. So, and held so that those native grasses kept the soil in place. Even though they may not be great to eat, we can't eat them. The cattle could, and that was good for the cattle. But the problem was the more they ate, the less there was to hold the soil. So the grass held the soil. But with the cattle eating the grass, that grass was being taken from the soil, and so the soil had less and less plant life to hold it. All right? So in the 1920s, farmers in Texas and other states plowed up much of the Great Plains to grow wheat. Wheat did not hold the soil as well as native grasses. Then drought struck in the 1930s, leaving the soil dry and loose. You have to understand, they went ahead and had grass growing, but the cows ate up most of the grass. So what did they do? They went ahead and planted wheat. The only problem with the wheat was that didn't hold and get hold soil any better. So you had soil that was loose and dry. So when the spring winds came, they lifted the soil into the air, creating huge clouds of dust. The worst of these storms were called black blizzards. That's when the dust is so thick it blackens the air, with walls of dirt reaching more than a mile high. In 1935, Amarillo suffered a black blizzard that blocked out the sun for more than 11 hours. Blocked the sun out more than one Amarillo resident remembered seeing a huge, dark cloud approaching. This is what they wrote. We were running toward home when the wind hit. Pelting our bare legs with gravel, we choked and gasped as the air thickened with brown dust. Just as we reached my front porch, everything went completely black. The porch light was consumed by the blackness. We couldn't see each other's faces. We couldn't see our own hands. I remember gasping, I can't breathe. Okay? Parts of the southern Great Plains soon came to be called the Dust Bowl. Drought and dust ruined crops and thousands of cattle died. Many cattle ranchers struggled financially during this time. 1/3 of panhandle farm families received charity relief. About 90% of the local farmers had to take out loans to be able to buy necessities. Friends, and that was only part of what people went through. Pretty difficult times. The Great Depression, the Dust Bowl. Thanks for watching.